Call this joint City Council Parks Committee to order. Welcome everybody. I know both our council and the Parks Committee has been looking forward to this meeting for quite some time. This is our second opportunity to try to meet. Snow tried to get us both times, but we persevered today. So just wanted to welcome everybody. We have an agenda here that we're going to try to be pretty fluid on. We're going to start here. I'm going to just take it through it and then I'll start the agenda. But we're going to start with a little bit of a review from Kathleen Walker on our parks program, kind of where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going. And then that's going to kind of set up us for a discussion to happen among ourselves, that will really start with where we are and what brings us here for this meeting and where we're going. It's exciting. It's an exciting time for Sandy. I think a lot of the reasons we're here today is because I think our Parks Committee is looking for a little bit of guidance from us as council as how we're going to come together over the next couple of years. And being classified as one of the fastest growing communities in Oregon, it's really it's an exciting time, but it also leaves us with a lot of stresses because our staff and our resources aren't necessarily to the point where we're one of the fastest growing communities yet. And so we feel the stresses of that, but we find ourselves at this point where we're kind of transitioning, right? As a community. So just kind of one quick thing on structure of the meeting before we get into our discussion after Kathleen's presentation is we have a lot of people here and we got a lot of different personalities, and so we're going to try to just go structure where I'd look for you to be called on by myself as the chair for your opportunity to speak so that we're not speaking over each other. And I don't know, I think council agrees. I try really hard to give everybody your opportunity to speak. So if you want to speak, you're going to get to speak. You just may not get to speak right at the very moment that you're hoping to. Kathleen, so we have a lot to cover here today. And your slide, I'm just going to, a lot of today's going to be about candor and frankness. Your slide's really long. And so, I'm worried looking at it that, it could go on for 45 minutes to an hour. I would ask you to try to keep it at about 20 minutes. And I know it's going to be tough, and to give a real high-level view of it. Because while we really got to concentrate on what brings us here today, we've also got to spend a tremendous amount of time focusing on where we're going to go ahead, right, into the future. So, thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay.
And I'm looking for questions after the presentation, so it doesn't bog her down and present. So let's let Kathleen get through her presentation, and then write notes to yourself, and then at the end, if there's questions for Kathleen, let's ask them, and then it'll lead us into our discussion. Okay? Sorry. I gave you the floor and I took it back. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to start with introducing somebody that many of you may know from past times. Is Nancy Ananda. She was the park staff, so a lot of what you're going to see today is because of her, or she was the source of a lot of this information. So if it's wrong, no. She did correct a few things for me, and so that was really helpful.
Like, wait, I think reflected that flame light from
yeah, that was good, right?
So, yeah. So I set it out ahead of time just to kind of give you guys, you can kind of just look at it at your leisure, but just the history of, we ended up with from 4 parks to like 17 parks, so it's really been a fast ride over the last 25 years or so. We started the Parks Board in '97 and did a master plan at that time, and that was before we had the community build, we had the community build in Fantasy Forest first. So we did a survey in '96 in anticipation of that master plan, and the most popular things were the hiking, walking, bike trails, sports fields, community gardens, similar things you're going to see the '96 echoed in the 2015 park survey that we did. The main recommendations that I want you to be aware of, because I know this came up in a December City Council meeting, which was prior, but that plan did recommend that the development of mini parks, which are going to be explained later, is discouraged because of their high installation maintenance costs. But the plan lined out 6 to 9 neighborhood parks, which average about 7 acres, totaling 43 acres, and 2 to 3 community parks, which is where you find your ball fields, your basketball courts, sports courts, things like that. And community parks have to be relatively flat for that kind of development. And then it also identified the opportunity for a large nature park along the Sandy River Trail, which we took advantage of that recommendation in acquiring grants to get the Sandy River Park acreage. So here's the map from the '97 master plan. The green, again, were the existing parks. The one green over to the far left is the Tickle Creek Park that still is not developed. It's kind of behind the trailhead there. And so the recommendations, the starred, you can see, you know, three or so community parks, and the rest are neighborhood parks, the little red dots. So you can kind of see where those are. We're going to get back to that. So the CIP plan at that time was mining park. You know, most of these are done, other than the Tupper Park, but the Tickle Creek Trail and land acquisition for future parks. And the intent there was that this CIP list, it actually got updated every year biennium, your budget biennium. It got updated with new projects lists. We usually had some kind of placeholders there, new neighborhood park, new, you know, trail expansion or something like that, that you could kind of plug in when things came up as opportunities for grants or development. We were able to plug it into the budget. And then some projects were project specific that way. But this CIP list in the '97 plan was used to originally calculate system development charges. So I'm going to go quick to the park types. There's 3 park types basically: mini parks, neighborhood parks, and community parks. Mini parks are your less than 1 acre. They're, you know, examples: Johnsrud, the VFW. We ended up with more mini parks than we planned for in Sandy, but there's no parking, and it's just, you know, they're basically tot lots is another name for them. And again, they're, for this population they serve, which is mostly under the age of 5, you know, it's a fairly expensive thing to serve, so that's why they're discouraged. Neighborhood parks is the key part of our park system. Their acreage is 5 to 10 acres, and the objective that nationally and also Oregon adopted this is that, you know, basically 80% of the houses are within a quarter-mile distance to the park, so that basically you can walk to the park, and then 20% can be within a quarter to a half a mile. So you kind of draw a circle around, you know, the park, and that's the population intended there. And you don't have any kind of physical barriers like rivers, highways, major roads, and things like that, arterials and stuff. And again, your objective is to have some flat ground in there for ball fields and things like that. So great examples of that are the Bornstead Park and the Sandy Bluff Park. Community park is your size of 5 to 50 acres. And those, you know, usually between 20 and 50 acres, that's where you have your organized sports fields and your ball courts, you know, tennis courts and things like that, swimming pools, things that draw a larger population than your neighborhood parks. So again, the radius for those, serving those, is ½ mile to 3 miles. And examples are the Sandy River Park and the community campus and Mining Park, which Mining Park's like 10 acres, so it's kind of on the verge there. But it does act as our community park because of all the different things that it serves. How do we get parkland? Basically, we either get developers to dedicate the land as part of their development, or they, or we acquire the land, and part of that is either using fee in lieu of money that they, you know, if they don't dedicate the land, they have to pay a fee in lieu of the land dedication, and then we can use that fee in lieu of funds to buy parkland. And we can use, you know, grants, city funds, you know, loans, things like that, or we can get land donated. So those are the ways we get parkland. How we get it developed, again, system development charge. So there's the land dedication policies and or fee in lieu of requirements, and then there's system development charges, and we have SDCs for both parks and trails. And so how do we get them developed? They, you know, they give us that money, and we can either develop park facilities and get SDC, and they can develop it and get credit for it, or we can collect the SDCs and grants and volunteers and other things and actually build it ourselves, you know, build it with contractors or volunteers or whatever. So that's kind of how they get developed. The current acquisition policies are that they dedicate relatively flat, dry land. They can't kind of give us the yucky stuff. You know, we don't want wet hillsides. Or they pay the fee in lieu of. And it's the city's choice is your policy now. And, but it does have to be, you know, land that can accommodate a park. And it's based on, you know, there's always usually some give and take. The purchase outright option is where, you know, example of that is the Bornstead Park. We paid over 1 million acres for that, over $1 million for the 5 acres, which included a house that was probably worth around $200,000 at the time. So an example, you know, kind of be mindful of is when a developer would rather pay the fee in lieu of than dedicate the land, that's when you want to make sure that, you know, your fee in lieu of is intended to be able to buy parkland to meet the need for that neighborhood. So you gotta, you know, you gotta have a willing seller and land that's gonna meet the need for that, for the neighborhood within that quarter mile to a half a mile distance. Your dedication policy has been since '97, 4.3 acres per population, and that's basically, you know, if you have 100 houses, 3 people per house, times 0.0043 per person. Anyways, it ends up being for like 100 houses, it's 1.29 acres of parkland that needs to be dedicated. Or if it's a fee in lieu of, then it's, you valued that land at $241,000 per acre. And that's where, you know, for 100 houses, 1.29 acres gets you $310,890. The SDC charges were established, I believe, in 2002 or so. They've been updated in 2013. They may have, you know, there may be more details on that, but currently the SDCs for SFR are $37.17 for the parks and $13.97 for the trails. The big question has always been what can it cover, and basically it can cover new development, it can cover, you know, new populations or populations that haven't been served in the past. So like a dog park, you know, we didn't have one, so that's a new population that was getting served. And, you know, things that have ADA, a certain, you know, a portion of a project that serves ADA where there wasn't being served before there can be, you know, you can use a portion of SDCs to kind of cover something like that. The CIP plan requirement is the second part of what SDC funds cover, and that's where it's really important to have your CIP plan updated and married to your Parks Master Plan. That's going to come up a little bit later. And like I said, we adopted, or you know, you all adopted the budget, the Parks CIP budget every 2 years, and so that was intended to update the Parks Master Plan. The inventory that you have right now, as you can see, we've got a lot of those mini parks. We've got quite a few neighborhood parks, and then we've got the community parks. The acreage here is a little bit misleading because, you know, for example, Johnsford Viewpoint is almost 5 acres. Only, you know, almost most of it is over the hillside. So it's, you know, so what you count as total acres versus developed acres is important here. And so the neighborhood parks is a good example. With Knollwood Park, the actual developed acres, you know, it's pretty much a tot lot. But it does have all that open space, and the Tickle Creek Trail goes through there. So how much of that do you count? That's, you know, how we kind of figure this out is something, you know, going forward, you know, the master plan will help inform all this as to how much gets counted, because how much land you need for the future growth depends on where these things land currently for your future needs. You know, what unmet needs do you have there? So that's important. And then one example there is Deer Point Park. You know, that's, you know, currently not developed. That was something that we identified. They dedicated it as a park. We assumed that the next parcel would come in and get developed, and we, you know, put those 2 parcels together to make you know, more like a 3.5 to 4 acre park, hopefully. But that development hasn't come in yet, so they don't have anything. Deer Point folks, if you have talked to them, they're not real happy about not having a park in their neighborhood. So the how the parks actually got built, we got acquired in '63. You know, if you guys have been around for a long time, you know, there was the gazebo, there was the birdcage theater got replaced with the new amphitheater, the stage for music in the park and movies in the park. A lot of that kind of got done with a combination of general funds, public works dollars, and some SDCs. The phase 2 was done, we used general fund dollars to do a blueprint for the phase 2, which called for redoing the trails, which are in horrible condition, putting in a dog park in the upper area, installing park lighting for security, and restoring that no-name creek to kind of provide some kid-friendly access, but also kind of restore it because it's a bit beat up. We bid that whole project as an entire project, which I think is kind of a mistake because I think you get better prices if you break it up. You know, a fencing contractor for the dog park and things like that. The bids came in way too high because it was bid in summer season for a lot of reasons. The SDCs were kind of questioned at that time, and so basically the grant that we had gotten for almost $275,000, we had to kind of give back a year and a half after we'd gotten the money. So that's kind of something we don't want to do again. So, but that's kind of where Mining Park is. So you can see, you know, Fantasy Forest, the stage, the gazebo, the amphitheater, and then you see some of the problem areas with the trails eroding there on the side of the creek right in front of the stage, and the erosion and all. So the Johnswood Viewpoint has been 25 years there. It's beautiful. It's huge. Since we put it on Google Maps, it's exploded in popularity. So people are really coming there. You know, great photographer shots there. It just needs some love and attention, and so we are submitting a grant here tomorrow to tourism grant. That CPP dollars that, you know, we've got a grant put together to replace the facilities that are worn out and need replacing. Sandy Bluff, again, that was one where since it has multi-phases, we were able to get a lot of the, you know, a neighborhood park acreage. And not just, you know, 100 homes worth of a development. It was a big thing, so we got the neighborhood park. It initially was not developed. The developer came along and said they want to kind of have a park slash drainage storage, stormwater detention area, and so they paid for folks to come in there and do a landscape architect design the thing, and then there was also involvement from us for what kind of facilities went out there. It was a community build, as I understand it, for the playground. And then the dog park got installed in 2014 with a combination of funds, and it's very popular. These Barlow Ridge, Hamilton Ridge, Cascadia were all land dedicated by the developers, and they wanted a park in their development, even in a few cases where it was, it wasn't on the 97 master plan, but they wanted a park in their development because it sold houses. And they thought it was important, and they came to the city and said, "Can we go ahead and put a park here, even though it's, you know, get that offset?" And we, you know, they collectively said yes, that was okay. So that's how you ended up with those mini parks. Now you might want to change that in the future, but that's kind of how those, you know, that was something the developer wanted, not something, you know, and it is helpful to have. The Salmon Creek and Timberline ones again are land dedicated by the developer. And they hire consultants to do the design and involve the community and neighbors and Parks Board and City on the design of the facilities there. The Knollwood Park was previously owned by the homeowner association there. It was, I think the playground there was used playground equipment from a church or something, and so that was, Jerry Crosby was one of the people on the planning committee. He kind of got all this people to sign over the deed, and the city took that over and worked with the community to replace the structures there. Bornstead has been you know, we've only done phase 1 on Bornstead. There's a whole nother phase if you've been out there, you know, but it's hugely popular, especially with that higher density development, splash pad, community gardens. You know, it's a great neighborhood park. Again, it was $1 million. That was done with a loan, interdepartment loan from Public Works, Sewer, Water, something like that fund, and then it was paid back with fee-in-lieu funds, and then also they got a huge grant to develop it as a match, and then they used some SDCs and some general funds. One of the things that we kind of was a little bit of a aha moment for us when we were developing the park was that when you have a park where, you know, there's streets on all sides of it, we are required to, you know, Parks is required to build half the street and the sidewalk. So, you know, we barely have money for the parks facilities, let alone paying for streets, but that's, you know, and I don't know if that's changed yet or not, but anyways, that was kind of an aha moment for us to have to do that. The trails, Sandy River was logged and then partially logged, and then it was purchased with a grant, and then it was developed. There was a general fund set aside for a master plan, And then we got a $300,000 OWEB grant to, I mean, the thing was covered with blackberries 20 feet high, and so we got an OWEB grant to go in there and cut out all the blackberries, and when they had equipment, and so we kind of planned trail locations, and so they took the equipment down the trail and built the trails when they were getting in there to get the blackberries, and then they went in and reforested it and thinned out the alder and things like that. And then after that was done, we had another opportunity, and we built the Jim Slagle Loop Trail down there, and that was one of our most recent projects. So that was a partnership with the Ant Farm. It was Jim Slagle himself. He was a resident in Sandy, and he had Recreation Trails Incorporated, and he helped design the trail. So that's how that got done. Chickle Creek, one of our favorites. This is like a legend in the Portland metro area, because construction, not the land acquisition, but the actual construction, where trails usually go for $1 million a mile in Portland. We built this with 5 huge bridges for $189,000. And so it is legendary in that we do things fairly, economically. But we owned part of the land, and then we acquired some of the land, and we got an easement on one parcel. The funding was a combination of SDCs, general fund, and a huge amount of in-kind and volunteer labor. Again, Jim Slagle was a neighbor there, and he did the design of the trail. The Forest Service, Mount Hood National Forest folks helped us with bridge design. And then the construction folks, that was actually, we had helicopters flying in those big bridge stringers to protect the forest setting there. We had local youth crew, and Fred Punzel, the ex-police chief, was one of the other volunteer crew leaders in addition to Parks Board people. So where are we now? We've got 17 parks, where we had 4, remember, when we started. We had 3 trails. So several mini parks, because the developer wanted a park to help sell homes. And then, because again, 100 homes only get you 100 homes only get you basically, a mini park. The large space development of Sandy Bluff got us that other big neighborhood park. The most of the plan, and I'm going to go over that, is built out, but not all of it. The current land dedication of 4.3 population is still in effect, but the current land dedication policy for what's called the National Recreation and Park Association is 9.7 acres. So that's almost double. So that's something that you guys are going to be looking at in the master plans. What is everybody else? Usually it's kind of, what is everybody else doing, and what's the national average, and then y'all will decide, what's appropriate with input from your consultant. So I'm going to go through the, here's kind of how, 97 to compare to now. There was a plan, let's see, I don't know if this, the dot to the right of Sandy Bluff there was the planned park in the 97 plan, and actually those are conceptual locations that got built to the left there. Then that community park that's out at Kelso there is not yet developed. That's a village designation up there by Kelso and Bluff, and that's not yet developed and hasn't. The Sandy River Park, that has, obviously that's been acquired, and the trails that were identified in the 97 plan have been developed there. More potential with the community campus trails addition there too. So this is not yet developed out there, kind of on the edge of town. I can't read it. Developed. Oh, so say developer one of the park. That's Salmon Creek Estates, I think. That's Knollwood. The green dot there is actually Knollwood. It was an existing privately owned park, but now it's been converted. What does that say? Can you read that? Main part, the Trick Trail. So the yellow corridor through there is the proposed trails. And so you can see the green line is the Tickle Creek Trail of how much is built, but there's the 97 master plan did have extensions on both the east and the west side that's still out there. The developer wanted a park, that's Hamilton Ridge. This is not yet developed, this is a community park. And this is where, the Melissa and Rachel Street neighborhood, what's that called, Nicholas Glen or something? That's all kind of tipping down towards Tickle Creek there. And so the plan there was to make, since it's a community park, remember we're talking ball fields and things like that, more flat ground. And so, and again, these are conceptual locations, but that's the, there was a park you know, called for in the 97, a community park called for in the 97 plan in this conceptual location. Bornstead and Cascadia were not in the 97 plan because I don't believe the city limits or UGB were at that time in place there, and so once that got incorporated in, then that village plan and all that they did called for, that part of that plan then amended the 97 plan, and that's where you got the Cascadia and the Bornstead parks identified. Timberline Rim, again, you know, you've got a park there. It was located just to the left a little bit conceptually in the plan. This park is not yet developed. I think that's somewhere over by Jacoby or so. And then you've got another park over by Vista Loop that's not yet developed.
Yes, we were getting over 20 minutes
all
here,
right.
so.
Yep. And then Deer Point, again, it's not developed yet. The 2015 survey that we did, the most popular things were the restrooms. If you know anything about parks, that's always the number one thing that people like to comment about is toilets. But the next thing was, you know, trails usually are a close second. So the popularity of all this is very similar to what we saw in the 96 survey, with some exceptions. Ballparks not, ball fields are not as high as I thought they would be. But we did have 600 people respond on that survey, so that was a pretty good representation. So the management structure for our parks are spread in 4 different departments for planning, operations, maintenance, and enforcement. And so that's something that in the future it'd be nice to kind of have some, you know, the master plan can kind of help inform you about what kind of a staffing organization you might need to kind of efficiently manage it. We don't have a documented park facility condition inventory. It's really helpful to kind of have that because then you can kind of help prioritize. You can figure out, you know, grants, you know, what we get a grant for to fix or replace or whatever. So having that documented inventory is something that we don't have now and it would really be helpful to have. The budgets are, building maintenance is all lumped in with the park maintenance, so you can't tell how much park maintenance is costing you. Pool operations are currently separately tracked as I understand it. But for future needs, it would be nice to be able to kind of track parks and trails maintenance separately from pools and separately from all the, you have like 6 different buildings spread across the cities, many, you know, requiring a lot of upkeep and maintenance. So it's be helpful to know how much, you know, your time and staff and funds are going to building maintenance versus park and trails maintenance. And then again, establishing that prioritized trail list so that we can get Eagle Scout projects, ant farm, you know, park users and things like that to kind of help pay for some of the work that needs to get done and do it. The development policies, you're going to be looking at that, 4.7 versus 4.3 versus 9.7 or something in between probably. You're going to need to update, you know, or at least review and update the fee in lieu of, does it get you what you want? Then your master plan is going to map out future parks in the expanded UGB and UGR, and then look at trailways, trail connections. We always like to use an emerald necklace concept where you've got these trail systems around the community that get people from neighborhoods to the key destinations to other parks. And you're going to do a 20-year CIP plan. And the important part of this is making sure your CIP list clarifies your SDCs, and that the master plan and the CIP list is married so that when you update your CIP list as part of your budgeting process, that automatically amends your Parks Master Plan. Finally, next steps, you know, it's Parks and Trails Master Planning is something that's, you know, it's a science and art. It's not a DIY project. You know, once you get a project designed professionally, getting volunteers to help build it is great, but you don't really want folks, you know, you really want some of the professionals doing the design part of it. And then the other part of that, as you can see from the slides, we've had all these consultants do all of our master plans, but it still takes a lot of time and energy to oversee them. You need to know what you want, what the city council wants, what the Parks Board has to say, what the community wants, and that whoever's overseeing that contract for a master plan really needs to know what's what, and make sure and write herd on the contractor so that you get what you need. The RFP is the next step type thing. Selecting and approving the contract would be you guys to do. Working with the contractor then. And then, like I said, in the future, you know, there's some grants opening up in April, the big, huge state park grants, which are the big dollar ones. So there's an opportunity that, you know, the project manager may be able to apply for some of those, because that money won't become available until 2020. And so, which hopefully you'll have your master plan done, and then you'll be keyed up for it. So that's an important part of that. And, you know, again, finalize that, and let's get some grants and build some parks and trails, because that's my favorite part of the whole thing. So thanks for taking the time to do that. I think, you know, the future, what I see is we need, you know, community parks, we need those ball fields, we need a trail system that, you know, we've got Tickle Creek on the south side, we don't have as much on the north side, so there's some real potential to kind of loop Sandy, and so that's the future I see, but everybody will think different. So thanks for your patience.
No, thank you. You did really good there. You did really good. I couldn't have done it. I like to talk too much, so good job. I just want to start that Nancy and Kathleen. You know, that presentation we don't get from there to here without, you know, a lot of the time and effort and dedication that the two of you put in. So, as before we get going on this, I just wanted to say thank you to the two of you for all of your work and dedication on this. So first, I guess I'll just start with, is there any, and of course, Parks, feel free to ask too. I assume that some of you are more up to speed on some of these things than council is. Is there any questions for Kathleen on her presentation before we get moving along here?
Super quick one.
Yeah.
Let me find my little note here that I wrote down. So Kathleen, the math that you used to determine the fee in lieu of, is that 1997 math or is that 2019 math?
For the fee in lieu of, that's
For the acreage, for the
Kelly,
value of
It's
an
been
acre?
updated
Yeah.
on an ongoing basis since the original master plan, and I believe the last one, we updated it so that we can include trails in part of the methodologies. And I know it was before I split, so it had to be at least 2 years ago.
Okay, so it's fairly recent.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think it was
that's what-
maybe like within the last 4 years.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I just,
and that's including the per acre in lieu of rate of
I believe we
241,000.
updated the fee in lieu and the SDCs.
Okay.
And the difference, I think everybody knows this, but the fee in lieu is for land only, can only be used to purchase land. The systems development charge then is what you use to develop on the land that you have currently to increase facilities for new residents only, or to build new facilities in newly purchased parcels.
okay.
So for example, because that was one of my first questions on the SDC, so if we wanted to look at the Bornstead master plan and add on to that, we could use SDC funds to expand that because it's for new residents and stuff, right? You just can't use it to do maintenance on the park as it currently exists. Is that correct, for the most part?
I mean, I don't feel like I'm
An attorney
qualified to
yeah,
totally, you know,
sure.
do you want
Yeah.
my opinion? I've got an opinion, but you know, those,
Yeah.
the whole use of SDCs, like, you know, is that a new park? Is that an existing
Yeah.
park? And, you know, we do have a master plan for phase 2. I think, you know, your idea of, you know, looking at phase 2 again, now that you've got all the neighbors around there, to make sure that's where we want to go is a legitimate thing to do. And then, you know, when it comes down to, you know, whatever we want to have done out there and how much it's going to cost and how much might, you know, that's again where, you know, Nancy was great at getting the grants, and so even if SDCs, because to some extent, whatever you build there is for the existing neighbors right there, right? And so even though there's some more, you know, the new developments going on around there, those are obviously SDCable. But
The facilities that would come in phase 2 are a parking area. It would take the house and turn it into a community center and install a basketball court. Because those are additional facilities and not replacement facilities, those would be SDC eligible.
Okay.
To give a very legal answer to that is, if it's for expansion of capacity, then it can be SDC eligible. But before we use any money, if we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, I would check with our attorney's office on how much of the project is SDC eligible.
I was gonna get out my magic wand to do it. Come on, man.
well, that's where grants can also help you because, you know, it's usually not 100%, and so the grants kind of serve as that filler.
Now, I don't want to digress into this topic, but I do think it could give us an example of some ways that we need to improve and kind of could give council an idea of how the different pieces come together. Because I don't ever like to be in a situation where we've been allotted funds and then we have to give them back, okay? So can you take us through, you kind of glanced over the mining park improvements, how we obtained a grant, and then we received it, how we spent the grant, or didn't, yeah, we finished, or didn't spend the grant. Take us through what happened there, as
Well,
diplomatically as you can.
Yeah, we identified in, we used general fund dollars to do a phase 2, and with these master plans, a lot of times you just kind of get these nice colored glossy pictures, but you can't just say give that to a contractor and say build it. And so we decided that instead of kind of color glossy, we kind of want something more blueprint ready so we can turn it over to a contractor. So that's what we did with, you know, developing phase 2, which was and there was more than just those 4, the dog park, the lighting, the trails, and the stream restoration. There was more than those intentionally, but then the price got too big, so we kind of narrowed it down. And Nancy can jump in here at any time when I get this wrong, but, so we went after the grant and got the grant. And so then,
Though you said we applied for it in a broad fashion, right?
yeah, for those 4 things, we applied for the grant, and it
Yeah.
included, so when we applied for it, the intention was that still the city would be paying for some of the project. And there's a spreadsheet that goes with that as to what we were gonna pay for ourselves and what the grant was gonna pay for and all that. So then we put it out to bid, and because we didn't put it out to bid till like May, when all the contractors already have work up to here, they're gonna throw you the bids that are, you know, like
Super.
3 times more, as we know, and so, and they did, and so then it became, you know, too much. And so, you know, there was the ability to, you know, so things weren't getting done for about a year, and Nancy and I were kind of asking, by this time Nancy retired, and there was, you know, a lot of transition, and just stuff happens and stuff. And so that was a lot of it, was just the, you know, Nancy retired, and there was just not and then there was, you know, a lot of transition with everybody. And so, so then what happened was there was this question, you know, about, you know, the SDCs and just the whole processes of roles and responsibilities. So we kind of met to try to talk about that, but by that time, it was pretty apparent that, you know, we weren't gonna be able to get it done. You have a real small window with the Mountain Festival.
Yep.
And all that, and so, you know, just trying to get it done is gonna be, was a challenge. And so, and the bids that we had at the time, you know, to try to kind of redo the package and try to piecemeal, you know, the dog park here and that, it would still take money to do that, and we didn't have that money. So we ended up giving back the $274,000+. They've kind of indicated that, you know, they're okay with it. I think, you know, we didn't necessarily poison the well, but that said.
You're still giving it back.
We hope.
Yeah, the group and the committees that review those grants, Nancy used to be the chair of the statewide committee, and those committees, when you give money back and stuff, you know, tend to give you a little bit of a punishment there. So, you know, it's possible we won't get as favorably looked on here in this next, you know, it usually takes them a couple of years to kind of forget you or give you a second chance, but, you know.
Kelly, you had your hand up.
Part of the reason we had to give the money back is because we had counted on some of the matching funds being SDCs. And then when, as I said, when we checked with our attorney's office and looked at the existing methodology that was written by Dr. Lazenby, Mining Park and Tupper Park currently in our methodology are not SDC fundable.
Okay. Yeah.
We hope to change that in the future.
I was interested in this legal opinion that we got today from our attorney about that particular subject, and I wondered if you could put it in layperson's terms for Park Board and us.
I'll be sort of careful because we actually have an attorney in the room representing one of the people. But basically the gist of it is that until, this is the attorney's advice, it's not my advice, so take it as you will. But until we update the Parks Master Plan and until we update our development code with criterion around parkland dedication requirements, that he would be very careful on requiring parkland dedication on any areas that the developer does not want to dedicate parkland.
So you could still collect the fees.
So key part there, though, that I'm hearing, okay, is so that we don't get in a position where the builder or developer wants to have a park. We're saying, no. We don't want you to have a park, because unless we have a basis in our parks plan and stuff to say that, a criteria to say that, you know, if we do have criteria to say it doesn't fit into our overall master plan that can back us up, then we may be able to say that. But until we have that, we shouldn't be in the practice of saying, you know what, we don't want you to have a park, we want you to give us money. But what we can practice is if they say, you know what, maybe we don't want to have a pocket park, and we're willing to forego the pocket park to provide you funds, then we're allowed to then accept those funds and make the decision to go ahead and do that. Is that kind of?
Kind of, yeah, and as you read that letter, the two main things are takings claims, and that's where we get into the thing of a developer comes in, doesn't want to dedicate parkland, we don't have anything on a parks master plan at comp plan showing a park on that property, and we still force them to dedicate property.
And so conceptually, if you did have a, if you did have a parks identified in that place, then, that's a different kettle of fish, because you do.
I have a question about that.
I have a question.
So if when we did the original master plan, we were instructed to put dots in areas, but we couldn't identify the property legally, like say we are putting the dot on, Brad Picking's property, which covers, of course, half of Sandy, but anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, what I'm saying is you couldn't say a specific parcel by legal description. They told us specifically it could be, a conceptual dot on a map. And so if anything in that area was a potential for where we could build a park. So that sounds like what it's, and we have the right to say, yeah, that we have a conceptual design that shows a park in this area. This is where we want you to build a park. Or somebody built it on the property next to you. Why would we have another quarter-acre park right next door? That doesn't make sense. That's why we have that flexibility.
So I can address that a little bit. Some of it's just that case laws change. And if you look through David's memo, several of these case laws that he cites have taken place since 1997.
Right, yeah.
The other big thing is all this needed housing stuff, fair and objective standards. That's where Mr. Robinson was arguing the point. And that goes to the next level of not only being a taking potentially, but as I said, there's nothing in our code currently when you look for a subdivision approval that's clear and objective on whether we can require a park plan unification or not.
And I'm kind of concerned because I know that there's ex parte contact and stuff, and you're going to discuss this on your March 4th meeting?
Well, I'm not talking about any particular property right now.
Well, I've heard mention of certain, so that's kind of where I'm just cautioning that,
Yeah,
first of all, I don't,
agree.
they came into our Parks Board meeting and kind of ended up, taking over a huge amount of our Parks Board meeting when we had a full agenda otherwise, and I don't want to see that happen again here.
So I'm only being asked to give advice from what our attorney has given me as feedback. That's what I'm doing.
General.
Yeah, Lori?
Hey, Kelly, since you touched on it, educate me on why Mining Park is not SDC eligible.
I don't know the history. I reached out to Dr. Lazenby. He doesn't remember. But when he wrote the methodology, for some reason in the plan, in the methodology, it was determined that Mining Park and Tupper Park, we wouldn't be able to attribute any future capacity increases to those, and therefore they wouldn't have SDC eligibility. I think looking back on that he admitted to that probably wasn't the best decision, because as the community grows, Mining Park only gets used more. So I think it should be SDC eligible. So we just need the methodology to be updated with the master.
So we just need to change the language essentially?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank
you, Kelly.
In the master plan is our opportunity to do that.
Yeah, that's when you typically revisit your methodology. That's
Kathleen.
The other thing that, kind of going back to this idea of dedication versus in lieu of it, as far as, like, dear point, when you're gonna develop something and there is a plan, and this is something, I think it's just a paperwork issue, but the objective there was that, like Deer Point doesn't have a park. And when you look at, where are people gonna go and they don't have a park, developers may be pushing one thing or the other, but who's gonna be coming to, you're gonna make a decision based on whatever, but who's gonna be coming back to you in a year saying, the nearest park is over a half a mile away.
Right.
We got nothing to, whatever, the highway or the DeBarco Road is too far, or whatever. So, it's important to kind of think about that, I guess.
Okay. All right, so now that gets us to our next point where we're just going to get into the discussion of roles and responsibilities. Before we get into this, I wish I would have started with this. Let's just do a quick introduction around the room, starting with you, Valerie.
Yeah, Valerie Wickland, Parks Board member.
Mike Weinberg, pretty new Parks Board member, not quite as new as Val, but I've only been around a year, so it's a learning curve.
Yeah.
I could not do anything close to what Kathleen just did.
Yeah, right.
Give it 25 years.
Susan Rue, I'm in the Parks Board for about 10 years.
10. 20.
Sell yourself short.
I'm Kelly O'Neill, the Planning and Building Director.
Anya Richardson, Community Services Director. Sarah Richardson, Recreation Manager.
Lindsay Babbitt, Grandma.
Michael Robinson, I'm a land use attorney, hope to be a grandpa someday, my kids cooperate.
David Hill, Allied Homes and Development, fingers crossed, no grandfather necessary.
I gotta step in there. I'm Carl Exton, one of the city council, and I have 4 grandkids.
Kathleen Walker, Park Board and Park and Trans volunteer.
Bethany Schultz, City Council.
Jan Lee, City Council, and I have 5 grandchildren.
Jeremy Pietzel, the City Council President, and I was also the representative to the Parks Board for 8 to 10 years. That guy?
John Hamlin, cookie connoisseur and city councilor.
Stan Pulliam, mayor of since January. So, but I grew up here in this community, grew up in playing in a lot of our local parks. I got 2 little girls, 8 and 6. They have their own, you gave me names of parks, but they got big park, medium-sized park, little park, big park, so, yeah.
Laura Smallwood, City Council.
Gary Conley, City Recorder.
And Jordan Wheeler, city manager, and I'm enjoying learning about our parks and trails system.
Okay, so roles and responsibilities. Those were one of the items that kind of came to us that we were looking for some clarification and a little bit of vision, but also want to hear from you and your takes as well on roles and responsibilities. One thing that I have found that our council seems to really kind of believe in, and it came up in a meeting that Carl and I was in earlier this week, is transparency and candor, right? And obviously respectful dialogue and candor. But we need to, my gut tells me is we probably need to hash through some different things. And so that we can all jointly, the idea being that we lock arms and are in all together in one vision when we leave this room. And so I just want to kind of go through a couple of different things. I brought with me a Oregon, and has everybody received and read the proposed kind of roles and responsibilities that got sent around?
I did, but I didn't print it out to bring it.
Yeah, I don't have a physical copy with me.
Can you put it up on the screen?
So while Jordan does that, we don't need to necessarily go through and review item by item, but I brought, and we're not Oregon City, right? We're Sandy. We're our own distinct culture and city government and the way we do things. But I did want to just give reference, because it's kind of always, a topic that comes up is like, what do other communities do and how they tackle this? And so I just wanted to read through kind of, there's the creation, the name, but really the purpose. So the parks, and they call it the Parks Recreation Advisory Committee, PRAC. So the PRAC exists to aid the city of Oregon City in providing ample and diverse recreational opportunities for city residents, in part by advising the city commission through the Community Services Director on the implementation of a park and recreation master plan. The following partially lists the objectives and responsibilities relative to the purpose. Objectives may be added to or deleted as necessary. 1. Maintain active communication with Community Services Director and other relevant city staff. 2. Provide recommendations to the City Commission and City Council relative to parks and recreation. 3. Solicit citizen opinions relative to parks and recreation. 4. Request information from and consult with service organizations, special interest groups, neighborhood associations, and other professionals as appropriate. 5. Oversee implementation of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan through periodic reviews, updates, and recommended revisions. And 6, provide public meeting time for citizen input. Okay, so that is that's Oregon City. Now, as I read through and read through, and I think our council did, kind of the proposed roles and responsibilities, it's significantly different than, yeah, that'd be great, thank you. It's it's significantly different than I read that was provided. What's provided, is we're going into funding sources, budgetary concerns, access, budget needs, monitor finances. We're really, and I've been told this as a mayor by my city manager more than a couple of times, that I personally need to get out of the weeds. So I understand the need, and quite honestly, I started this meeting thanking Kathleen and Nancy for everything they did, because we wouldn't be here today if our Parks and Recreation committee didn't get into the weeds, right? Like, I understand that, and the big kind of elephant in the room, and I started by saying we're not Oregon City, is we're not Oregon City. We don't have a Parks and Recreation department here in the city of Sandy. Now we have community services, right? But we don't have a full-blown department dedicated to Parks and Rec. And I'm new here, but grew up here. Is my gut tells me from different conversations I've had is that we've leaned heavily on our Parks Committee throughout the years out of necessity to get things done and to take a more proactive involvement. And if they hadn't, we wouldn't have all the things that we just discussed here today. But it goes back to we're now in the top 5 fastest growing communities. We've got our staff isn't to the size that we need them to be. There's still a lot of strains on them, but we are a larger staff than we certainly were back in the mid-90s and the early 2000s. And so they're kind of ramping up and taking on more and more responsibility as well. That said, citizen involvement and citizen advisory and commission and council input, that's how we function, right? We're here to create a vision that then gets implemented by the staff that that our representative that we hire, Jordan Wheeler, a city manager, goes out and puts his team into place that goes out and implements it. So I'm not asking that everybody that's sitting around this table agree with everything I just said. In fact, I'm asking that you disagree, if you disagree. Let's have a conversation about how we landed here, right? What's going on, why we're involved in the different things that we're involved in, and let's just talk about how to kind of all get on the same page and vision, and so that when you folks meet to do the important heavy lifting that you need to do over the next year and a half with this master plan, that we're all kind of rowing in the same direction, right? So I'm opening the floor.
Okay, I'll start out.
Yeah.
Yes, I've been concerned for a fair amount of time that the Parks Committee has really done just what you're talking about, Stan, in that there's a lot of work that's been going on because of some of the skill levels within the Parks Committee. I think that's really been obvious, by the way. Kathleen's, mostly I consider Kathleen and Nancy as the spark plugs in those kind of areas. But the concerns I have has been that our staff are the ones that need to be the implementers, the people who are responsible for the budgets, responsible for carrying on the direction from council and from our different citizens, the kinds of things that need to be done. And I know that Kathleen's been here a long time, and Nancy maybe even longer. What happens if they leave?
Yeah.
What happens if they take on something else? And volunteers? I've been trying to volunteer for 30 years, and I know these gals have got longer to spend some time on that. I plan to spend less time once I get to be in my 80s, so I'll probably get out of that point. But I do think, for me, that's a concern. The consistency, the carry on, what's going to happen as we move through time. I'm also thinking that as much as I love Kathleen's skills and abilities, I think one of the things she mentioned earlier today anyway, this evening, is that we ought to be using some of those contractual folks who have those high intensity, high level kinds of planning and abilities to do those kinds of works that we all want to see in our parks. I just think that there is a place that we need to make some change here in our direction. I looked at some of the lists of here are things I thought, and I said no a lot. There's a lot of things in here that the other committees don't even come close to. I kind of feel badly for the Parks Committee, and I think there is way more on there that you probably should be doing. Part of it is workload, part of it is responsibility. I think some of that should be put on the backs of our staff and the backs of our committee. So I see, and if you want, I can go through list by list, but I think starting out of the table, getting on the table, that's my opinion, is I think we need to look at drawing some of those responsibilities into the staff level. And if we have to, is bite the bullet. Say, if we can't do it, we can't do it. I'm concerned on several levels.
Valerie,
I think that the dispersed organizational structure over the parks is a concern and an issue in how effective it can be, because nobody really sees the full, no one individual is responsible for seeing the full financial picture. I'm thinking of the budget and spending the money. Who knows what all is happening where? And as a parks board, when we think about making a recommendation regarding a park, big or little, we should have information as to how much money it takes to operate the park. What is the maintenance, the annual maintenance? We don't know what that is. I don't know if anybody knows, because the numbers are hidden, just because of the way the budgeting is and the financial, this financials are prepared. I mean, I don't think it's intentional, it's just the way it is. So that's a concern that I have, is that the financial picture gets lost, and that no one individual or group has the responsibility to look at the whole parks.
So, and then I'm gonna be jumping around, I'm gonna go to Lori next. Okay, I'll go to Bethany next. I think there's two things kind of addressed there, Valerie's. One is, and I share the concern, is we have multiple people on staff that's overlooking, whether it's the pools, the parks, the senior services. We have different people looking over the items that are all kind of in the same budget, and so it's hard to track. That said, and I hear what you mean as far as recommendations, feeling that you want to get more of that information to be able to base us with a recommendation. But I think you could set priorities because remember, we're trying to be visionaries here, and when you set priorities, those priorities lead to the person who is armed with that information to understand what the priorities are coming off of the advisory committee, and and looking at the budget realities. And we have to be transparent with our budget. So I mean, that's something we've got to make sure we're getting more and more transparent about. And it's quite honestly, it's a council goal of ours to get more transparent with it. But that is we're looking for recommendations and priorities more than we're looking for budget allocation. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess I'm not talking so much of budget allocation, but just knowledge of what, how much money there is, what was the budget, how much is left, just to inform our decision making.
Okay.
We're not making decisions, but we're making recommendations.
Recommendations. I'm gonna go Bethany, and then I'll go to you, Kathleen.
I agree with everything that Carl was saying. It seems like if you do look at our other boards, they're not as work intensive as the Parks Board. I was on Parks Board for 3 years. Like, I know what you do. It's amazing. But I do agree that we need to get it off of your plate a little bit more. So there's a more centralized system, and I'm sure you agree with that. But I think what Valerie is finding, like with the budget stuff, it's important information, and this is her background, and she's really great at it. But again, it shouldn't be her. She shouldn't be the one having to do this. So I do think we need to find a person, a department that is in charge of all of this, so that she doesn't have to go digging for like all this information, or it can just be in a centralized location where this is where the money is going and this is why. And maybe that will be more apparent with our master plan and having more of a concrete document in place there.
That's a good time of the meeting because we're going to go into our budgeting cycle here real soon. Okay, Kathleen?
Yeah, and I was just going to, I think some of our Parks Board members have a little bit of whiplash because on the one hand, we were being asked to like go out and inventory, do the parks facility condition inventory, and including life and safety issues and things like that. And I was, that's when I wanted this roles and responsibility, because I'm like, I don't think that's our responsibility. And so, and then when it came to the budget, we weren't looking to kind of allocate money or micromanage the budget. We just wanted to know, like, what's the SDC, how much do we have in the pot of SDCs and how much do we have in general fund? What are the pots of money and just what's the amount? We weren't, and hopefully with the budget process that you have, I was kind of asking Lori, but, I would, in the past, what we did was at a Parks Board meeting, during the budget preparation, Nancy would kind of outline what the staff's proposal was, and then we'd kind of say, yeah, or, make a couple little advisory recommendations, and then she would take that back to you all. But at no time that I've been involved have we been kind of micromanaging the budget, and I feel like that was a perception by some. And other than just trying to get a clear, there's a bunch of different pots of money, and what do these codes mean, like 013 or 023, on your transparency stuff. It's not as transparent as it could be.
Right.
Like what code, what pot of money is this, and what can you spend it on? That was the extent of what we were trying to get a sense of. So I feel like that's really good that we're, talking about this. We're not looking to make allocation decisions or get into the weeds with budget, stuff. We're trying to just figure out what the total budget is, and then, like you said, make, kind of, the master plan will kind of help identify priorities and things like that, and we're just advisory.
I'm gonna go Jan, and then I'm gonna go over to Lori, and then I'll go to Jeremy.
I'm feeling that the council doesn't get enough information from the committees, and that we need to have some better system to do that. Maybe at each meeting or each workshop, we have a committee that gives us a more full report so we know what's going on. I think the lack of communication between the committees and the council causes us to get into some of these turmoils.
Well, but some of that, Jan, I would put on us. And I think as a new council, though, I think we've gotten better. The only problem is it's only February, and, and we got kicked off. It started in January. But when you hear me talk a lot about council leadership, that's. These folks are already given time, a lot, onto their community stuff. That's why we're sending our council representatives so that they can be reporting back and those kinds of things. Lori.
Well, I was just going to say, and kind of piggybacking on what Carl was saying, and also what Bethany was saying. When I look at something like this, I think it's because what has happened is in the absence of an updated master plan and a clear direction from council, there's just a lot of confusion. Right, of what are we doing and where are we going? And so I think all of our hope in this tonight is to provide that clarity, and then I think some of this stuff will clear itself up. So.
You go to Jeremy, and then I see you, Mike. Yep.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think, in the room we have just a couple people that were here just a few years ago. The Parks Board has a lot of turnover, and so sitting here, we have Kathleen and Nancy, who was on staff, but they were the ones that created this whole thing. And over time, Susan came on, and then I've been representative or part of that board for a long time. But there's not this. That is who is on there. We've had a lot of turnover on that. But to Nancy's credit, when she was here, these projects came up, and she got to start them at the very beginning, and so you can grow into positions. And so when people retire, like she did, it takes 5-10 people to replace someone like her. So, and that's that happens a lot in jobs where people have worked there for 30 years, and in these things that was easy for that person to juggle coming in, there's a lot of moving parts. And so in that process, I think. What happened was the city had divided up the structure of parks between planning and community center, and then we've got maintenance, and so the budgeting part of things that we're talking about would be, well, what's coming from, how much of the parks stuff is coming from here, and how much of it's going there, and all that, where when it was under one person, for the most part, Nancy, we were able to talk about this, and she was able to bring that back to council, and that I think sometimes it's easier for, you know, someone that's been on a lot of these boards coming back, that it's not as easy for council to report on these things as staff in the room taking notes and can understand some of the jargon and lingo and acronyms of what's going on, and doing some of that research are the ones that are here on those nights to read represents back. And that's how it seemed it used to work in those processes, and I think it worked very well. I think it's just been in more just the last couple years that we've had this change of feeling, especially with the Parks Board. And I think, you know, some of that is just a retirement that's happened, and a structure change has happened, and so there's a lot of difference. But the Parks Board is not that old. When we have people volunteering their time, like you said, you know, and then people come on and leave for different reasons. Some people think we have $1 million, $2 million to spend every year, and let's go spend money. But that's not how Sandy is, and so then they hop off the board because they just want to make shiny things happen. But you know, is understanding that. But yes, it's a visionary thing, and I think that's what it's been. And it's been part of that with doing the master planning and those type of things. But also someone on staff that is involved to be able to answer the questions like, hey, what's going on down here? Instead of getting a response going, I don't know, I'm going to have to go check over here, they're part of that process. So there's that disconnect inside that whole board, because not enough people, staff, are able to answer that question.
Or there's too many people trying to answer that question.
Correct.
Mike?
Let me step back a moment and talk from the perspective of a new guy.
Yeah.
When I came on the board a year ago, I had sat in on a couple of meetings, and that's the only way I got to get any idea of what the Parks Board did. When I finally joined, there was no orientation. I was never given a packet of materials that talked about our roles and responsibilities, that talked about the procedures that we used when we ran our meetings. So all I could do was listen and then maybe say something that was wrong. So I think it's very timely, at least for me, that we're having this roles and responsibilities discussion.
At all, yeah.
And probably should have had them a couple of years ago, but now is the better time than later. And I'm looking forward to having a clearer idea of what it is that I'm supposed to be doing when I come to one of these meetings.
And go Valerie and then over to Carl.
I just wanted to say that ties into Carl's comment about how people come and go and the knowledge is lost. Yeah. If we have something like this document where everything's written down, people can come and go, but the procedures, the process, it stays. So that's really good.
That's a very good point. Carl.
Yeah, I really love the conversation going on here. One of the things that my goal this evening was to see if we couldn't put the committees all in a relatively even base about what their responsibilities are, so that we don't have one committee because of whatever circumstances, and I'll be the last one to point back at any fingers at anybody, that because of whatever it is that happened before, now are taking on responsibilities that may not be appropriate. Other committees aren't stepping forward to do the kind of things they maybe should be doing. And recognizing that there are differences between the parks, between the library, between you name your committee, transit, on and on and on. All those things, there should be a reason, a rationale for having those committees. And I hope that we could be able to come up with a fairly level understanding of what that is. And in my mind, I'm going to stick myself out there a little bit and see if that's what gets taken task or not, but I was under the impression that our committees, other than the commissions, which is different, but our committees were there to help provide a way to get understanding from our citizens in a way that we couldn't any other way. Because those folks were really interested. They would provide input to us, advice to us, information to us, because they were not only concerned about that resource that covered that committee, but also a way for us to listen to the citizens. Not to build master plans, not to manage budgets, not to supervise crews to get things done, but to be able to interact with us, and so we could understand better what the citizens of Sandy were thinking. And that may not be all of what those committees were designed to do, because I know there's some advice that happens.
Right.
There's expertise that develops, especially like in our, I think in the Sandy Net committee, there's some real high-level skills in some of those committee members that, much like Kathleen is high-level skills that just really came to us and we'd like to take advantage of them, but I'm not so sure that's what we really should be taking advantage of.
Well, so then I got a bit of a comment on that. So, you know, where I get nervous, I think we start playing in this area where, I'm just candor. You know, I talk to folks that have had experiences on our budget committee. And a lot of those folks will say, yeah, my role in the budget committee is for staff to come in and present the budget, and I rubber stamp it, then it goes to council, and council rubber stamps it. Well, that's not advising. That's not community input on the way a budget should go. So I'm going to transition that into a conversation on what is our relationship been between the Parks Committee, and I want staff to speak up on this, and I want Parks Committee to speak up on this. But I don't want to leave anything in this room. What's the relationship been like and the dialogue back and forth between our Parks Committee and our city staff? I'm going to start with you, Kathleen.
Don't you feel like you're under a microscope now?
You know, I kind of echo what Val said, is that, you know, 3 years ago, things were pretty well, because there was, you know, kind of a, you know, it was either a Mike thing or a Nancy thing. And it's not like they were doing it all. They had, you know, the communication was there. It was easier. Now, when things are so spread out, it is challenging. And the other challenge is that the people that have been given responsibilities in some cases have, you know, they're starting at the very bottom. And, you know, Nancy had a degree in Parks and Recreation. She had experience in it and all that. So, you know, we got lucked out there. But I think that you know, so it's a lack of experience, it's a lack of understanding for roles and responsibilities, and then to some extent it's also a lack of experience working with volunteers who, you know, and an understanding of what, you know, what we're here to do. And you know, so recently there was some unpleasantness that, you know, didn't go well, and we don't need to dwell on that. I think we've kind of moving forward, but it does, it's just, like I said, you know, when it's everybody's responsibility, it's nobody's responsibility. And so that's kind of my comment on that, is that in the future, now that we're growing, to try to kind of streamline things, and like you said, Carl, rely on consultants and all, but also then have somebody in-house who can kind of ride herd on that, who understands, you know, what we're trying to get, is going to be helpful. So, yeah, I think there's, you know, it was going really well for a long time, and then there's been all this transition and bumps, and I see it getting better in the future.
Now, Kelly, I'm going to go to you because your department's on this. You know, now our planning director is going to Parks Committee meetings, and you know, your role falls underneath that of Jordan, but. Yeah, I don't know if we necessarily need our planning director with all the stuff going on as one of the fastest growing communities, like taking on parks, right?
I agree.
Right. Yeah. Right. So, well, hold on. Right. So with that, we have several people on staff that is corresponding with our functions on parks, and we've had. And I think it's led to some confusion, and it doesn't help with communication when you have so many different staff members doing that. But I hear it from this, and I'd like to hear what the experience has been like from the staff perspective.
Well, I'll just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed all this stuff immediately, that it's got to be really confusing for a parks board member. It's confusing as city manager trying to figure out who does what, and you know, planning has the planning role, but there's staff in the Parks Board. We don't have a Parks and Recreation Department. That was, you know, news to me as I'm doing research on you know, the city. I would there's no secret about this. I think everyone, I would love a Parks and Recreation department.
We all.
And I thought we had one.
A lot of people
And I've been
do.
on the council the longest.
Right,
Yeah.
a lot of people think we
We do.
do.
It's still today, I think we do.
But we have parks maintenance under public works, and we have community services that does recreation, senior programs,
Oh,
you know.
let's find out, so we're doing this.
But I think, you know, what's happening is we just have a lot of change occurring. You know, we have a loss of a lot of institutional knowledge, a lot of new folks. I'm meeting a lot of people here tonight for the first time. And so exactly, you know, these things happen. There's frustration that, well, why doesn't this person know? Why am I as a volunteer know more than staff, you know? Because it takes time to learn, and it takes time to meet people and understand how people work and what are our roles and responsibilities. And, you know, they're very great points. If we don't have, you know, bylaws and we don't have something on paper where we can bring a Parks Board member on and say, here's what the Parks Board does. But, so back to the staff side, there's definitely, we need work there. This is a consequence of change. It's a consequence of capacity, where we don't have, you know, somebody that is a Parks and Recreation, you know, analyst or project manager or someone that works within a Parks and Recreation department that can staff a board right now. We have capacity issues given the projects that we have on our plate. You know, in the last couple of years, we acquired a pool. And we have a massive community campus project that we have staff time working on, you know, working with the council on planning the future of that campus. And so, you know, that void has to be filled, and our challenge as staff is to figure out how to best fill that void with input from the council and the Parks Board. So, you know, for me, this is very helpful because I've been wrestling with these issues initially as city manager. How could we better staff this thing? I don't want my planning director being, you know, yes, planning commission, absolutely. A Parks Board, I don't know. But I can see the reasoning behind that is because the major project that we've already talked about for a half hour tonight, and I'm sure we'll talk about more, is a master plan. And who's best to help with master plans? Our planners, who do that for a living, they plan. So I get the synergy there, and absolutely planning should be involved, but you know, the Parks Board should have responsibilities beyond just, you know, working on developing a master plan.
Jordan, and there may not be a good answer to this, right? And it goes back to the strains on staff and growing. We're growing, but we're not necessarily there yet from a staff perspective. Is how are we supposed to give guidance and allow our Parks Committee to get pulled out of the weeds and become more visionary if they're not able to receive the support that they need from a staffing perspective for things outside of our control, right? I mean, how are we supposed to get to that point? There could be no answer to that. I don't know. I think that's kind of what we're struggling with tonight.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Staff does need more clarity on what the scope of the Parks Board is, honestly. You know, do you want them providing input on parks maintenance, you know, levels of maintenance and priorities for that, or do you want them to, you know, stick with, you know, the bigger overall picture on where the next park should be built and, you know, other ideas in the master plan, providing input on capital budgets and the 5-year plans and things like that. I think that would be helpful because there's confusion there on staff side of, you know, is the Parks Board in charge of this? Are they in charge of deciding on a fee-in-lieu versus a park dedication or not? Sure. Is that, you know, their decision? But absolutely, some of this is on us in terms of getting you information. Absolutely, the budget needs to be more transparent and clear about what do we spend on parks and, you know, how that works. And, you know, Parks Board members shouldn't have to do, you know, hours of research to parse that out. And that's where we can, you know, be better in terms of getting information as requested. Because I think that helps you understand the bigger picture. So I get that, but absolutely, we need clarity as much as the council does, so we can better support the Parks Board.
Sue, you've had your hand up.
I don't know quite how to say this, but I'm glad to have that you mentioned the community campus because from my perspective, in all those years, the parks, the whole function was going along, and then we used to talk about the pool and the school and all that sort of stuff, and then all of a sudden happened, you know, the pool just, you know, came to the city and all that, and then everything changed. I mean, and Nancy retired, and we don't really have a staff person anymore, really. And then we got that little thing with all the columns from the previous city manager about, you know, how things would be divvied up into 3 different ways, and everything has kind of gone down the tubes, my point of view.
Sure.
You know, ever since, because if you don't have a staff person, you don't have a department, you don't have a district, and you have all these parks and everybody wanting parks and wanting that function and everything, and yet we don't have staff. And I don't really think whoever, you know, whatever a committee of people might do, how can they really do anything if they don't actually have staff? And I think the combination between Nancy, who was, you know, and like Jeremy for years, being on council, we had really good communication going there, and we somehow got Mike in the loop and all of that. So now it just feels like, I don't pay enough attention, I guess. I haven't been paying enough attention to the campus over there. I was in school when that pool was built, and I went over there, you know, since they got it into the city's hands, the grand opening or whatever, and I went in and I looked around to see, you know, what's any different.
Yeah.
And the shower heads were the same height, and a lot of things were pretty much the same, and they'd taken out the diving boards and things, and so there's this, but it's like this kind of, you know, like, well, I don't know how to characterize it. I mean, I feel as a parks, you know, person that I feel it's ripped things away from us. So I do have some negative feelings, I guess, just for ignorance. I mean, just from lack of information and stuff. I don't really know. I don't pay attention to their budgets. I don't know what's happening. But really, if we had a Parks and Recreation District, it would certainly seem that we would all be together talking about things once in a while, because they have all that land behind them, you know, that goes down beside the Sandy River Park, and all this stuff would be of a piece for the city to talk about being visionaries and stuff. I mean, we would look at it as a city, and as it is now, it just feels like it ran off into another part of the city, and you know, has separate staff that left. You know, the position that was Nancy's and that became the Tanya's is gone off to, you know, wherever. So anyway, I guess that's enough of that. But I feel like we need a staff person. The parks deserves some staff. Anyway, I guess.
I think a lot of your words land on a lot of the people sitting around the table with a like mind. I really do. Kelly, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, if you want candor, I'll give you candor. I'm never one to shy away from that.
Kelly O'Neill's gonna give you some candor?
So 2 things, and I only have 2 things.
Yeah.
The first of which is the thing that's been emphasized in my department since I took over a little over 2 years ago is business-friendly relationships with developers, relationships with people like that. I think there needs to be clear expectations that when a developer or representative of a developer, such as people sitting over here, go to a Parks Board meeting, there's clear expectation on how the Parks Board will treat those people and react to those people. And what I felt happened at the last time when they showed up would probably not be representative of what you would define as a business friend.
Okay.
The second point is that my wife used to be on Parks Board for 2 or 3 years. When I became a department head, she stepped down.
Right.
Or shortly thereafter, when I assumed some roles. I think it puts staff in a very odd position to have Kathleen as the spouse of a department head. And then when my staff member gets questions on maintenance, and he has to go to Mike and ask maintenance questions, and Mike says, well, you should tell the Parks Board to respond to us individually or ask questions to us individually, he's not getting answers. So how does he bring that back to the Parks Board for feedback? So I think there's some issues that we need to work through, and I think we need, if we want to be honest, I think it's a very perplexing, complex situation when you have people on board that are spouse members with department heads.
And then I see Jan, I'm gonna go there. I agree, it's awkward. It can be awkward, right? But you don't, and you know, that was a decision also that was made in your household, right? But you don't give up your rights as a citizen in the community because your spouse, you know, has a certain career path. So I agree, it's awkward, but I do think there's little bit of a balancing juggling act there, Jan.
Yeah, I lived in Bend for 17 years, struggled with the very same problem, and they put together a park and recreation board, which is hugely successful. And I think if we're really ever going to do the community center, the pool, and everything we want to do, that belongs to a park and recreation board that's separately funded, that the community strongly cares about and is willing to support it. That doesn't solve the problem today, but that's probably what we need to be looking at in the future.
Well, I think you're talking about March.
That's not today.
That's not today, but welcome to what we're doing in March, right? Carl?
Yeah, a couple things.
I'm sorry, can I ask, are you putting a Parks and Rec district on the ballot?
We're receiving information from OPSIS on the community campus, and then we're having work sessions to be able to provide the community with a vision for the future of that project, which could encompass, you know, some of the different items we're talking about tonight. We haven't had any conversations as a council.
About a parks district that
Well,
would be
so when you
independent funding.
So when you think of, so Nancy, when you think about different funding sources for any future of a project, you're either going to have a public-private development project, you're going to have a bond levy, or you're going to have a district, right? I mean, there's only so many ways to create. So all of those items, I'm sure, will be on, you know, in front of us as council as we discuss different ways that we can move forward with some of what we're talking about tonight, including the community campus. So, yeah, Carl.
You've mentioned a couple times, and I know that Kelly has intimated it, that we are a growing city with a lot of things happening to us, and all those things we're trying to balance on one table. Some of that is, as a small community, we have a certain number of people who can volunteer, and they happen to be married to each other. That happens because you're in a small community. As we grow, you can do more things, separate some of those things, or recognize how that stuff happens. I've been in several small communities over my years, and you just see it. There are people who are volunteers, and there are people who are not. And sometimes the volunteers go through the whole family. So sometimes it's a good thing, sometimes it's an awkward thing. And I think that in this case, it's a little bit of both. So as we grow and as we get bigger, we're going to have to find ways to handle all those things and make that happen. Number two, sort of in the same area, is City of Sandy, from Dr. Lazenby clear to today. We have had this philosophy as we are lean and mean, cheap as we can be, and we're helping our community out by doing everything we can. By some of those projects up in here, you're famous for doing a $180,000 project that should have been $2 million.
Right.
We are famous for that. I think we're done with that. There are some things now.
We want to try to still be.
We will try to stay as lean as we
Yeah.
can, but buddy, we we have got big dollar figures on our table coming up here. The community center is one of those things. We want to go off on the sewer plant, but by golly, that baby is not going to be cheap either. I think we have to start thinking about bigger picture, council, that there is going to have to be, bite the bullet, we are going to have to start spending some money. And it's going to have to be many of the things you just talked about, Stan, and I think that there is recognition that we can't be the cheapest, we can't be the least expensive fee city in the county. We've got so many things on our table, so many people coming into our community. We've got to have these things funded somewhere.
So I'm going to go to Kathleen and then Jeremy.
Okay, I'm gonna hop around the plate a little bit. Yeah, I've, you know, being married to Mike, that has never stopped me from coming and testifying at city council meetings, and sometimes projects that, you know, Mike was involved in, but I didn't agree with and stuff, so I didn't give up my right to an opinion. You know, and we kind of have a wall, we don't talk about stuff at home, and so, but that's it, you know. The reality though is that, I did get treated kind of poorly. You know, when you go back to the staff, I got treated kind of poorly, and I kind of thought I didn't make a scene because of that situation. And it wasn't until other people pointed it out that they couldn't believe how I was getting treated. And that was kind of an eye-opener to me, because I just kind of rolled with it, you know, because it wasn't a big deal to me, and I got thick skin. But my point is that, you know, I'm here to kind of help Sandy's parks and trails. I put in a lot of volunteer hours. I want to be respectful. Regarding the the last parks meeting, the addition of having the developer come, I don't quite know what's meant by that, but I guess I take a little bit of exception because we're asked to put all the agenda items way in advance, and that got walked on the afternoon before the meeting, and we've never had developers come. They were questioning a decision that had gotten made at a previous meeting, and we didn't have the staff person to kind of help us figure out how to deal with that, and also we had a full schedule, and we allocated 10 minutes, and it went to over 30, and so I was just like you, Stan, sometimes, with the, you got 20 minutes, Kathleen, wrap it up, that kind of thing. So I don't believe we were in any way unprofessional or disrespectful to them. You can put it, you can watch it on tape and, point out otherwise to me, but it was kind of a new situation that we'd never had before. Okay, then I'm going to go back to the pool and all that. That's something, so moving forward, we've got this pool, and I'm going to tell you, first of all, I'm going to give you that history. We did a Parks and Trails District. We tried to pass that four times, Vance?
I thought it was 3.
4 times.
Doesn't matter, 3 or 4.
Three times maybe. I know it failed, and that was the Parks Board. That was why the Parks Board was formed, was to start a Parks Recreation District, because the staff couldn't do that. It had to be kind of from outside. And so it failed the first time by like 20-something votes. The second time it failed by like 4 votes or something. And the third time it passed, but that was the year where you had to have a majority people come out to voters. Double majority or something. And so it passed, but we got the double majority thing. So that's just a little background. And then after that, that's when we did the SDC funds and all that. So that's a little good history that wasn't on there. But now we've got this pool, and there was my testimony, you can go watch old city council meetings, was that, I didn't think it was a good idea for us to do this because it's a 50-year-old pool. I would much rather seen us go after a new pool, build a new pool or something. But we are where we are, and I'm here to support whatever decisions the past city councils made and try to make figure it out. But it does, when you're moving forward, having these kind of like we were told we weren't to even mention anything, we weren't to really get involved at all with the pool, the OPSIS, all that stuff. That was all a separate thing. In your committee groups on your website, there's actually calling out that there was, you have your library board and this board and that board, and one of them was a recreation and aquatic advisory board. And I called and asked about that because I was like, well, that's new. And so, that never happened. And so I think part of why you are where you are today, we are where we are today with the pool and the situation we have, is that, there wasn't a lot of, there was a little bit of public involvement, but I think it could have been done better. But I think it's difficult when you have, the pool and all that stuff, because it's a big money sink. And as I said before, it's coming at the expense of other things. The utility fee is a critical part of helping offset those costs. We don't have that yet. Doing a Parks and Recreation District is one approach to it. But I think when we talk about staff and planning and all that, you really do need to kind of look at the whole big picture, because you can't just kind of look at the pool and the community campus and then start doing a Parks Master Plan on everything else. Somehow those are going to get married together. You don't have to redo everything, but somehow you guys got to decide how you're going to marry those processes together, because going forward, the budget for maintenance or building or going after grants,
But I think, be the big and then I'm going to go to John, then I'll go to you, Nancy, so I agree. You should not have developers going to your meetings. Those are planning commission, and those are city council. And part of that is us providing staff with more clarity on that, right? But you're supposed to be visionaries in a parks plan, and parks come into development, but that is not, you're an advisory board to council. You're not making decisions based on development projects, and that's up to us to provide that kind of guidance to staff. That that's not a role that we're looking for our parks committee.
Just open meetings, but
open meetings. Yeah. That's not what I mean.
And I do want to clarify just for you, the Parks Board only got involved with parkland dedication when there was a planned park there, and all we discussed was like, it'd be nice to have it on this side or not next to the highway, please. That was the extent of what we got when there was a park plan there. If there was no park plan there, we never saw it. It was fee in lieu of.
And so we're gonna, some of the issues we're talking about here, they're literally about to be addressed. It's kind of like, but I'm gonna go John, and then Nancy, and then Kelly, and
you were before me.
Oh, I'm
and then
sorry.
that's okay.
I thought you were gonna say big mistake sitting in those seats because I
just say I got something to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, my finger.
I'm gonna try to make it. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, John, you haven't spoken yet tonight.
Yeah. So I've got a number of things swirling through my head.
Yeah.
One of the first things is really partnership. The word partnership. Just thinking what it takes to make partnership work. And I think this is kind of the example that keeps running through my mind is Arbor Day. And we go plant a tree in a park. And for city council, we read a proclamation, we show up to the park, we eat some Joe's Donuts, drink some coffee, have a couple shovels, and look like we're digging a hole that was pre-dug for us the night before, maybe days before. The tree, like staff are watching us, make sure that tree looks kind of heavy, we'll get it really close to the hole so it kind of slips in. But without that partnership, I just don't think it would work out. We probably wouldn't plant a single tree. Or we wouldn't be involved in planting trees as well too. So it has really nothing to do with trees other than the fact of that partnership has so many layers to it that didn't even exist that day and that city council wasn't even involved in, and the Parks Board may have had some role in one way, shape, or another, but the reality is I think there's a lot of need for a successful partnership with city staff.
Yeah.
And I'm catching a lot of like little bit of frustration here, a little bit of frustration there. And so I'm sitting here just kind of going, okay, how do we move this conversation forward? How do we actually, because I think there's a number of problems, or a number of issues. It seems like there's some tension, some of them may be personal. But the reality is I think until things are a little more clear on how the two different groups and even council, and I'm looking over at the wall here as well too. We've got 5, 6 different groups with economic development group as well too, but how do those relationships work? I think most of you know I work at the college, and if the board gets too heavily involved in trying to manage the operations of the college, it usually causes a bit of rift with staff. And we're dealing with one right now, you can read all over in the newspaper about KMHD and OPB and some discord, and our board made a decision to not renew the contract with KMHD. And OPB's got a very strong opinion, and we've got people at our board meetings now that are voicing an opinion of that. But it's a moment that the board stepped in too far in the mud is really where we started to have that issue. When the staff were working closely with the other entities and agencies is when things just seem to work fairly well. And I think in this situation, the biggest dilemma is there isn't necessarily clear staff relationship to be had. And so who is it? And it sounds like it's 4 different people. And so I think that's one of the issues as we're going into the budget process as well too, that we've kind of got to identify as a council is something needed to actually manage on the city side, operationally, effectively manage all this work. Because it seems like it's not quite working out with it being spread so thin. I also know that our budget challenges are strong like they are all across the state. I mean, PERS alone could suck up pretty much any bit of revenue or resource that we have. So I do agree. I think it was Carl, you made the comment, or maybe, yeah, it's Carl that made the comment. There's been a lot of comments tonight around we can't be the cheapest anymore. And it's like hearing that, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. At the same time too, our expectations as a community are greater than they probably were 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So we're not going to meet expectations by doing it on the cheap. Just how we communicate that as well too. So I don't think we're going to come up with a single solution. I know, Mayor, you wanted to walk out of here and we're all in arms.
Well, we're going to start getting more
solution
solution-based here real soon.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the direction. So I'm sorry if anybody had a comment that was coming before that my comment would have been better timed after their comment. If I took the wind out of your sails, I apologize.
Well, you're good. You're there. So we're gonna go to Nancy and then Kelly, and then I'll make it over to you guys. And then we've brought up we're kind of I want to start to get through to John's point. I want to start to get through the problem identifying, and as we're kind of speaking now, let's start getting towards where we're going next, right? What our future steps are going to be. When you're thinking through that, please have in the back of your mind that council does here in March. We're going to be tackling the community campus and all that, and trying to come together to provide a vision for our community and stuff. So as far as some of those things go, let's kind of concentrate on our, how we're going to come together as far as operating as a committee for our parks and working with our council and staff and stuff. Nancy, go ahead.
Well, I might be asking questions that have already been answered,
that's
but I'll
fine.
ask them anyway. First of all, I just want to say that in a way, you have a really good opportunity because you have so many new people to go through a whole scorched earth. We're starting fresh, and these are going to be the duties of each person. Because Kathleen and I have had this discussion where we all kind of back into what we were doing, because when you start with 4 parks, you go, yeah, that's manageable, I can do the, maintenance, I can, Anyway, then all of a sudden you've got many more than that with many more acres, and you're still packing into it, but, what you've been doing isn't working anymore. So now that, most of us dinosaurs are gone, you can, rise up from the tar pits and come up with something new. And so perhaps you've already come up with a structure or a couple of structures that you want to introduce that you feel are working models from other communities. And I think, that to me, if somebody has choices, it's a lot easier than just, blue skying it. The other thing is Kathleen's absolutely right. The whole reason the park board was formed was to try to help pass a bond to get some of the parks done that, that we had sort of envisioned. I guess I just have 2 more quick comments. So you can see why a park board would think that they had something to do with budget if in fact they were formed to try to come up with the money it takes to build. And so, well, that's okay. I'll jump in later.
Very solid points. Kelly.
Need to, but
So just a couple of points of clarification. I realized when I said that, people weren't going to be happy in the room with what I said.
No, I appreciate it. That's what we're looking for, man.
Yeah, a couple things of clarity. The developer was asked to come to the meeting by me because the attorney said that he should go to the meeting.
Oh.
So staff was giving clear direction from our legal counsel that the attorney had the option to go to that meeting and request what they requested. So that's all I want to say about that.
Oh, no, he totally has the ability. It's an open public meeting. I'm just saying that he's going to the wrong board.
Well, I don't know, that was the advice of the city attorney, is to go to that meeting, ask them on their advice, and then if he didn't like their advice, to come to you, which is happening now on March 12th.
Yeah.
And the only other thing I want to add is, I just wanted to clarify my frustration. It's very complex to work with 2 people in that situation.
Yeah. It is, but it goes to Carl's point. Our kids go to school together, Kelly. Mayor and the planning director. I mean, we're a small community.
I realize that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of it is where we are. Jeremy.
Yeah. So just a few things I've been jotting down so I don't forget them. I like the idea of the Parks and Recreation Board. It's like the Parks Board has grown up. We started it to do something, and now in a lot of other cities that is a combined thing. We're looking at it as the visionary type thing going forward, and in doing that, it was as Nancy said, to help get with that budgetary thing, to find money and do that. I think there's a difference between finding money and getting in the weeds of how much does a bolt cost or how much did it cost to mow the lawn and those type of things. I mean, we don't even as city council get into the details of that type of thing, nor do I want to. I mean, while being on the city council for the last almost 12 plus years, we review the budget that gets sent out there, and I go through and start picking apart things, and I'm like, oh, I have no time to do this, or why am I doing it? It doesn't make sense, because that's part of the job. But we are there to kind of find money, as Nancy had said, that's kind of where it goes. Or going out and raising money, which we've done for dog parks and things like that, or grants, knowing where grants are. I know Kathleen and Nancy have been in the past very successful in grants and in that. And so they have those expertise, but it's not necessarily, who's getting paid what and how much is doing that. It's a little deeper. It's the bigger 100,000-foot kind of directive on that. But I had a question for Kelly, because I haven't seen this while I've been on there, but, you know, you're busy doing the planning thing. So are you now going to the Parks Board meetings?
I've only been to one so far.
Okay, because I
That's the plan.
stopped coming in January, and it's only been 2 months, so before that, you hadn't, and didn't know if you changed staff up to have you do that now.
Yeah, I mean,
versus-
Kathleen alluded to it, and, you know, there was issues, and so we changed some stuff around. I'm
Okay.
planning on doing film.
So I know a director is, I think, appropriate person to be running meetings, and it's a little odd not to be the director at these meetings, because every other board has that. And so it used to be Nancy, and then Tanya, and then it got moved off to someone that is not a director level. And so some of the information that comes in there, I don't know if it's the best for the planning director, as juggling all these other hats as well, for that. Staff, you know, we need staff, and we need staff to do all the work, because we can't. We don't know the budget, we don't know the people, we're not in charge of the people or anything like that. But, you know, we come here as city councilors, and we rely on staff to do the work, and I'm proud of the work the staff does, and being able to give us advice on that. And so I think that's what is, you know, we shouldn't be the ones, as we were talking about that. I was sitting in some of those meetings going, wait a minute, no, staff is gonna go do that. No, the Parks Board is gonna, you know, it's like, you know, it's a visionary thing. And so I think there needs to be some of those roles that are appreciated about the difference between staff and volunteer work on that. And back to, you know, we're a small community, and I just want to say, I want the best people in our community on our boards, whoever they're married to or whoever they are, because they're the best. They have the most experience, and maybe I fit in a piece of that in a different area of the city too. But you know, and I think, you know, coming up with that, you know, Kathleen is, I think, the best in our community, you know, in our whole chunk of the state at doing that. And we're very lucky that that's there. And, I used to cringe when I was on planning committee when Kathleen would walk in and she would mic out. And I'd go, what the heck? And this is on TV. But I was new to the city stuff. But and then I just want to correct you, Carl, on the lean and mean slogan that we have. It was Mike that came up with lean and nice. And we are a city of lean and nice, not lean and mean.
It's because we get mean when we're so lean.
Yeah. And, you know, so and then, you know, something else that I've seen in other parks, and back to the money type thing, is where some nonprofits, not, it's still part of the Parks Board, but for a trail system, where these things have been developed, and kind of those parts of it have been managed by Parks and Recreation to help with some of that, but not necessarily the details of the other park. So.
If I can jump in before we get to the solutions, as a just piggyback.
Real quick, and then we're going to, because Jan's been waiting a long time.
Oh, sorry.
I wasn't really waiting, so I was just mentioning.
You guys are just
that
messing
Jeremy
with
didn't
me?
get his
We're
turn.
looking out for our
I
other
like it, all right, I apologize. Sorry to interrupt, Jordan. Go ahead.
You know, you know, hearing these comments, I can see solutions kind of heading one direction. And my only caution on that is, I love the lean and nice, right? And I think that's been something that, you know, Sandy is, you know, has been able to, you know, kind of champion and be proud of. I think what we've seen as the city has grown now to over 10,000 people, that our citizens are demanding more. They're demanding more services and amenities, and we've actually added them. You know, if you look at where we've added staff and like senior services, we have operating a pool that costs, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars now. You know, all this development activity has required more staff and planning. That you know, we'll have this conversation next week. There has to be some priority setting for staff, for us, to know what is the most important, because we can't. There's not unlimited funds, you know. In a way, we still have to be lean and mean in some areas, and in some areas we can be big and nice. But we're going to need council direction on what are those priorities, because we've kind of reached that tipping point where We can't throw more resources at something. Is it public safety? Is it more, is it to form a Parks and Recreation department with more Parks and Recreation staff? Is it a communications position? Those are all great needs, absolutely, every single one. I would love to go out and hire 20 more staff tomorrow, but we don't have the funds, and that's where we look for our elected officials to give us that guidance on where are those needs. And my job too is to look at the resources I have available, the talent that I have available, and allocate those accordingly. And I'm hearing this feedback that the kind of makeshift system we have kind of put together based on staff changes and what we have available isn't necessarily working out. And so we do have to study how we staff the Parks Board going forward and what that department structure looks like. And Tanya and her staff are definitely interested in working with me and staff on that.
So that's a good lead in to some things I just quickly wanted to say real quick. All right. So one is the vision's coming. It's coming here in March. Here on March 4th at our work session, we're going to be having discussing budget prioritization of some of our departments and stuff to be able to give some of that feedback. On March 11th, we're going to have OPSIS in here. That's the name of the consulting firm that did their market research and everything on the Sandy Community Campus. And they're going to be providing us some of their findings and the cost parameters and the overall package that they put together for us. Some of that information's already been out there, but with new counselors and new mayor and stuff, some of that information needs to be re-presented and given. And then it's, I believe, March 25th, we will, at our work session, be meeting as a city council to discuss, after receiving that information, we'll then be meeting in a public work session with each other and with anyone in the public that wants to attend after receiving that information, to discuss what the future of that project is and to start giving direction to staff as to some deliverables that we're going to need to be able to decide on funding sources and priorities for the community. Well, one is priorities for the community campus, and then two, possible funding sources and how we go out and find that money for the community campus. So that's when I say March. That's part of the elephant in the room here. Is hearing some of the feedback we're receiving is we're tackling it. We're just not there yet. We're tackling it in March, right? Some of the takeaways that I'm coming up here so that we can at least get some vision and clarity as we come out here. This is some of the things I'm hearing, and I'd like to throw out there because March is ahead, and there's some things that we need to be able to provide all of you and some clarity. One is we need the Parks Committee to tackle a master plan, the Parks master plan. That is, the next big step and project and vision that we need our Parks Advisory Committee to kind of jump into and then advise back to council. We've got to figure out who our staff resources are for the Parks Committee. And part of that is the vision that we provide here in March and some of the budget and stuff that's going to be going towards parks and funding sources. But we need a kind of the staff go-to for the liaison, so to speak, with the Parks Committee. Vision from council on the community campus. Then we need to, like I said, once we develop that vision and plan, we got to come up with a funding source for that. And then we need to jointly work together. That was, as we learned tonight, the origination of the Parks Committee. So when we develop whatever funding source and plan that we want to put in front of the community, we've got to all work together to go advocate for that plan and to make sure that plan can eventually become a reality. And then finally, it's on us as council, and some of this is our council rules, and we've got to work with staff, is we've got to develop a proposal for bylaws for not just our Parks Committee, but it's a goal that we want to accomplish, and we're not going to, quite frankly, transparency, we're not going to get those bylaws to you as soon as you want them. Our planning department is, one, they're trying to be visionaries, but they're also trying to meet the need of the day with how quick we're growing. As a council, we got a wastewater treatment facility that's gonna be, 60 to 80 $1 million that we're going through the phases of, and working with our consultant firms and working with different stakeholders to get their feedback on, and that's rapidly coming down the pike. And the State Community Campus we've been talking about. We've got, we've just got a big plate in front of us, and so we're going to try to get you. It's a goal of ours. We've had lots of discussions as council to talk about our rules and our bylaws and what we want out of the committees. I think Jordan and our one-on-ones, it's talked about at every single meeting, and then we go on this rant about how much is on our plate, and how we're going to do all these things with the staff resources that we have. So please know that we want to provide you with that guidance and that vision, and we're going to get to it. We just have some really big obstacles that need our attention right now, right away, that we need to address. But we hear you. We want to tackle these things. We don't want to leave you in the lurch, though. We got this master plan that's kind of sitting right there in front of us. I think that's a big task to jump into. That should be taking the vast majority of your focus in your meetings here over the next several months, while we kind of take our deep breath and catch up, so that then we can maybe do this again and be able to provide a kind of a better vision and guidance for you. So that's kind of my rant. Mike.
Okay.
Michael.
Coming back to these draft roles and responsibilities, it would seem that your reaction to this is less weeds, less detail, more priorities and vision?
Yeah.
That's the broad shape?
Absolutely. Yeah. Going real big picture, right? Let's develop a master plan of what we want in trails and parks. And then let's, provide council and staff with what the priorities, what ones are the most important to us. And then after we've established that, then let's go and find grants together and let's start finding ways to pay for it. Now that's really broad, right? And to your point earlier, Valerie, there's a lot to that, but that's what we're looking for, I think.
And if it's going to take you a while to do bylaws, can we do interim bylaws so we have a way of operating?
Yeah, absolutely, sure.
So has anyone seen the bylaws that I developed based on the library bylaws?
Is that what was sent around? That was in front of you?
That was what emailed out to us, Jordan?
No, that was
It was a one-page document. Similar to what you read.
We have seen it.
This is the one that we've read.
And we have not.
Who wrote
What's
these?
this one from then?
Yeah, that was that I did.
Yeah, this is one page, and then you also use the admin 100, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
I did.
you combine those two. Yeah.
So Carl and then Jan?
Some things I heard the last couple of minutes, Stan, I agree with. A couple of them, I don't know.
Yeah.
So here's my idea here is that, big picture, we all have our own roles to do and to work on in this particular city.
Yeah.
Some of those roles are maybe a little bit new to us. Some of those roles we need to step forward and take responsibility for. As a council, we're all about policy. We don't do anything that goes in actually getting the nitty-gritty done. That's his job and their job over there. But we have to all do our job. And the committees, I want to make sure we bring that into the same discussion. They have their roles. They really need to be able to accomplish the things that they need to be done, and we need to give them all of the resources so they can do that, or as much as we can anyway. We're never going to give them everything. Jordan's idea of putting 20 more people on staff is probably a great idea, but I don't think it'll happen.
I don't think, wow, that's putting words in his mouth. I don't know if you had.
I don't see us have the money for that. But I do think we need to look at our roles, and maybe some of them need to be clarified. It really sounds like the committee rules need to be clarified strongly and relatively soon.
Yeah.
But once we all figure those roles out, let's start working like a well-oiled machine here and get these things accomplished. We've got to get the master plan done. That is not obvious by this meeting. I don't know what else would be. The master plan has to get done. We have to get those bylaws figured out. Got to get that done. We got bills on our table right now that I don't know how we're gonna get it accomplished, but we gotta find a way, best we can.
Jan?
This is maybe more of a question for Jordan, but I wonder why we might not be able to have some limited part-time consultation either from our past director or from someone from another community who specializes in park work, instead of trying to find somebody to fit into the peg on existing staff when we know we don't necessarily have a person with that background.
Absolutely, we can look at that option. I haven't had
Maybe
any
Amy
conversations
Poehler.
with the prior staff.
Amy Poehler as well too.
Yeah, Amy
Right.
Poehler's available.
You mean Leslie, no.
Yes.
Well, it does lead into a
Already
great.
got Ron Swanson.
You know, I think it's been tossed around about now how to accomplish a Parks Master Plan. I'm on board with the concept of bringing on a consultant to do that work. One,
Yes.
we don't have the staff, well, mostly capacity, but the technical ability to pull that off. Where the Parks Board is going to be instrumental, one is the history and the knowledge and you know, helping prioritize and give input in that process, but being also that public engagement and communication arm too, where we can maybe lean on your volunteer time and effort to get out in the community and, you know, do that outreach to get that input into the priorities where we shape and put our parks in the future. But I'm definitely, I think that's an SDC eligible project to update the master plan. We can get an RFP out, get a good consultant on board. Internally, we'll look at who's best to manage that contract, and then how, you know, in that scope of work, we can even have the Parks Board involved with that scope and where you're involved and how you're involved in that.
I'm Jordan.
Jeremy.
Oh, I love your degree.
Jeremy.
No, I actually, be really short, I was gonna ask the exact same question,
Oh.
Jan. I mean, we sit next to each other on that, and my question you answered was, can we use SDC money for doing that? Because I thought you could, and so that could help alleviate, because I think there's some money in that account from what we got sent to us that could help alleviate staff time and propel that more quicker in getting it done.
I just wanna make sure that we're coming back to this real quick, that Valerie put this together, are we comfortable with, she was asking if this can be their interim bylaws until we have time to look into it a bit more.
Is this what we looked at today?
This was sent out to us by Jordan.
It's not the rules
She
or
put it,
responsibilities.
no, this was the
Oh.
bylaws, she put it together by looking at the library.
It's just the library
It's based
board
off of the
with a
library.
couple
The library bylaws.
It's already basically.
So I've read it a bunch, I'm full support of what they said.
I would agree with that.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. I thought you were talking.
No, no.
Document. Okay.
And also
Yeah.
responsibilities.
Yep.
Not that.
Right.
Just the $25,000 per month salary was
Yes.
the only part I had an issue with.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah.
She just.
Okay.
You guys get to college.
So, all right, so we'll move on. We've talked master plan. Did you have more to add, Jordan, on the project management approach and scope? Or, and was that kind of?
That was kind of it.
Yeah.
It seems like we're in agreement with that approach.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple people out there that would be available who have knowledge of the city of Sandy's past and, you know, things like that could help. If, you know, assuming you're open to that option, that could help oversee that contract with the consultant, whoever you end up picking, but, you know, that's the important part, is they have some knowledge of Sandy and, you know, or a little history or
This
something.
should absolutely be in the consideration. Okay. All right, so you want to discuss this interim direction on land dedication fee in lieu approach. It's not out of left field, we talked about it a little bit. It sounds like you're looking for some council thought on this. You know, kick it around. My thought is if we have opportunities out there to direct funds that reach our priorities as a council, why would we not? Why would we turn our back on those opportunities? I say if somebody approaches us and they say, "Hey, we're going to provide you with money for you to have the flexibility to do with it what you want," and we have guidelines for that, but where we can make the decision rather than them, I think that sounds awesome. I don't, for lack of a better term, I don't see the problem with that. Does anybody see a problem with that? I'm looking for
Wasn't the
thoughts.
only problem that was what Kelly brought up, which was that it might not be legal?
No, well, no, it is legal.
No, I
If
think
if
what
they,
you're saying
if they're,
is
if they
that-
come to us,
Yeah.
now we can't enforce that. We can't go to them and say, this is the new policy. Now, instead of having pocket parks, you're gonna start giving us money. That's not what we're saying. We're saying if there's opportunities where we have developers that come forward and say, we're going to provide funds for you to do with, you know, provide your vision towards, why would we not want that flexibility, Carl?
Yeah, it's, coming from it, where we first out of the world, if that developer comes to us and says, the way I can sell houses is to provide more parks, I'd be floored if we said, oh, no, we can't do that, sorry, you can't sell houses, and you don't want those parks.
Right.
Just seems to me that that's a logic that really makes a lot of sense, and sometimes those developers have a lot of knowledge. Now, I'm not going to give them all carte blanche. I think there are some things that the city has a bigger picture to look at than SAR, and we do want a variety of parks. We do want parks that fit to our people and to our direction. I think if there is a developer comes to us and wants to give us those kinds of amenities, I think it'd be tough to say no.
Well, no, but Carl, it's even better than that. They're saying in lieu of them providing those amenities, they'll allow us the funds to put towards our parks and programs and stuff, as we see fit.
Sure, and there's no reason to say no to that.
That's how I view it. Lori and then Jeremy.
No.
All right, Kathleen and then Jeremy and then.
That's been the requirement all along, is that either they dedicate land or they pay a fee in lieu. So that's not a new thing. In the past, when there was a park there in the conceptual location, that's when planning brought it to the Parks Board and said, you know, what do you think about this? Here's a park location here, and that's when we didn't. Our recommendation wasn't should we or should we not have a park here. If the plan called for the park in that conceptual location, it was usually something of just giving input as to where on that parcel of land was best suited for it. You always have the choice of choosing to the fees instead of that. The challenge that comes with that is that, and we've pretty much always done the park dedication, the parkland dedication when there was a park there in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge with you don't build the park where the park is planned in the plan is that you have to assume you have a willing seller. You know, if you take the fees, you want to provide a park for this development. Do you have a willing seller within the service area of that?
Or a park that's already established in the service area that could use those needed funds. As long as it's in that general area of the development. We have developments that are popping up in the same general vicinity.
No, we're talking about land acquisition versus fee in lieu, not development of the park.
I would just recommend going back to what our attorney advises today, and that's if the land developer, in the meantime, until we get our Parks Master Plan done and our methodology revised and our development code updated, which will be a recommendation as part of the Parks Master Plan update, is that unless the developer is willing to give land, his recommendation is that we tread very carefully and take the fee in lieu most of the time.
So it's taken away the right from the city to say which we want, money or land. Now whatever the developer is offering is what the city is required to
No, not necessarily, because it will be, it is for maybe the time being, but that's the hope of getting the Parks Master.
Until
That's
the-
right,
yes,
right,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I must be
Until
communicating
that
it wrong.
point where the
That's
master plan is
that's
updated.
exactly right.
This is the barrel.
Yeah, I think it was just confusing how it was explained.
Yeah, no, that's where I'm at.
But realize there may be, in the meantime, if we don't, if there's no willing land sellers around a parcel or neighborhood or whatever that's getting developed, if there's no willing land sellers around there, in a couple of years, you're gonna have a development with no park for that development. And so that's gonna come back, in a few years to kind of, people are gonna go, what the heck with that.
Yeah.
So it's just a risk that we take, and, and there's, it is a transitional period, but hopefully we don't have too many developments coming in where we have this situation, so.
Jeremy and then Carl?
Yeah, so spending the last 15 years, with the city, either on planning or city council, with the parks and that type of thing, we've noticed, and we've noticed from budgetary purposes of it, we do have a lot of little tiny tot parks, because a lot of these were, hey, we'll donate this piece of property, it's on the corner, and it's a triangle, and it doesn't work well, and then we've got a little tiny park, and then maintenance becomes really hard to go and do all these parks everywhere. Instead of having that plan, it's kind of rehashing the exact same thing we were all talking about. We need that master plan done or updated, because then we can go ahead of time and go out, like we did with Bornstead or that. And yes, you're exactly right. We have to have land sellers that will want to do that, but also leave open the opportunity for a couple of those parks that have identified, like Cascadia or some of those others that said, we want to put in a 3-acre park in the middle of our, I'll just throw out an absurd number, a 500 house development or whatever, just, we haven't seen one of those before, but a big development around it or a planned community around it. But without the master plan updated, we don't know those things, and we don't know how to plan for the future, the vision, and now we have our marching orders to go after that vision. So we really need to come back, but you throw out some rules, and then the pendulum swings one way, and you go, we didn't realize this. It's going to swing back. We got to be careful it doesn't swing back too far and just lands in the middle there. So we have probably too many little tiny tot parks, because they're just it's really hard maintenance-wise, because you can't use SDCs and you can't use those to maintain them. You have to use general fund money to maintain those, and so.
Still want to talk?
Jeremy said about 70% of what I was gonna say. It does come down to money almost every time. And I hate to be a record again, but we don't have the money to deal with our parks at this time. The maintenance is way behind, and our development of those parks, just keeping up with what needs to be done in those parks is still a long ways away from being done. I think that I'd love to see more parks, but I want to see some money to be able to maintain those parks, replace all those structures in those little small parks, as well as do some of the big things, bigger parks.
So that leaves and kind of allows me to say something that I wanted to say that's not on here, is we do have money for a dog park.
That's what I hear.
I've heard rumor of. So I mean, if we could just give one direction, is like let's figure that out, right? Huh?
We have a plan, we have the land, just need to go build it.
Do we know how much money?
Yeah, but we have about $30,000 or so. I've heard $20,000 to do it. But the idea, there's a current idea though that it was going to be in Meinig Park.
Yeah, in that
That's
upper area.
another piece, yeah. That's where the plans are. So we gotta move with the plans. We got a better place with a plan in
Like south end, upper?
Yeah.
Like Hemsley Cliff?
Yeah. So I mean, back to Candor. I think there's other areas.
I think Bornstead is a much better option for a dog park. Being a dog owner who lives close to the current dog park, I wouldn't feel great turning my dog loose on a hillside. Balls go downhill. So I think flat ground is a little more maybe appropriate. I'm just throwing that out there.
Just a little teeny bit of history, I won't do this too often, but
Yeah.
one of the reasons is that there's 5 acres in that upper area of Meinig. It's actually relatively flat,
Is
there's a
it?
slight slope to it.
Is
In
it
addition to
after you
the
get up
fact
the
that,
hill?
yeah, in
Okay.
addition to the fact that dogs like trees.
Sure.
There is a lot of nefarious activity that goes on up there,
Mhm.
and it's one of the constant complaints we got from neighbors is, why can't you patrol up there? So we tried to envision activities that could go on in there that would be beneficial and get eyes on that area, and that's what we came up with. It's about 3/4 of an acre, and like I say, it's fairly flat. It's got a bit of a slope to it, but that's how that originated,
Sure.
is that it was land, which we don't have a lot of, and it was on the south side of the highway. We have one on the north
I
side
had to
already.
do it.
So that's the history on that. And we do have a plan.
Jeremy?
Yeah, so, and I recognize this because I was part of the whole parts on the parks and the dog parks, and I'm not a dog owner, so I'll just step up right there, and I don't have a dog, and my kids wish they had a dog.
But you may run up that hill.
But
dodging the.
I'm all about the dogs being in a dog park because I don't like them as a runner, running me down. But anyway, what I see in that, and exactly you're right, Nancy, was there was some activity going on up there. But what I feel though is when something like that that is so popular over at Bluff Park is hidden away in the trees that you have to kind of know where it's at and kind of jaunt your way up there, and then the neighborhood around it actually has kind of larger backyards where dogs can hang out. Is we have something farther to the south where I'm just throwing out a flat park, because you wanted something flat. Cascadia Village Park, gazebo to stand underneath it. But the point being is it's very high density in Barnstead, in Cascadia, and there's developments because the annexations have just come in off of Joe on the other side, and there's another 100, 200, 300 homes going to go into there. That maybe that would be something that that would be a much used park, because we know that we've heard people come from Gresham out because it's right there. Out here, I'd be concerned. I've heard concerns from people going, "Wow, I don't know if I'd walk up there feeling safe, even with their dog." Not everyone has a big dog that's like Kathleen might have that bite down on some.
I don't know if I'm sending my kids with their golden doodle.
Their golden doodle up there, but so I think for the majority of the population there, that knowing those things, that there might be some things where people can walk their dog from a high density area where they don't have any yards whatsoever, and so.
Carl,
thank you for clarifying.
As much as I kind of agree with what I heard going on here, we have spent some energy and some time putting together a plan that says one of the best places we could put, maybe it's not the best place, but it's one of the things we said was the best place, put the next dog park is on the upper piece of Mining Park. I'm inclined to say that we should really follow through on our planning. We spent energy and money on our plans. Now, if that's not the right thing, maybe we should reevaluate it, but to jump into some other park that we haven't planned, that we haven't thought our way through it, haven't looked at the possibilities of, maybe a bit of a stretch in the jump. So I
don't think we're taking action. I think we're talking and discussing and saying perhaps we need to do exactly what you suggested there.
Yeah. And I did this.
Okay.
Kathleen, sorry. I know lawyers. They're pretty expensive, and they're here for a reason probably. And I haven't heard much from the lawyer yet, and this is a community.
Oh, we had a discussion prior to he came in and introduced me. If there's anything to say, it mainly was here for the in-lieu conversation.
Okay.
And,
all right.
And I think, I hope you knew you could speak up if you needed to put your hand up.
I wanted to interrupt your conversation.
Yeah,
but
okay.
I have to tell you, I see a lot of cities. I'm sort of a circuit rider lawyer, and you should be very proud of your community. We're very interested in how it grows and succeeds, and very citizen-oriented, so good for you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Do you have any idea where we should put that?
My first job as a planner was a dog park. And what I learned is, A, people love dog parks, and B, people don't want dog parks near their house.
Three, you build the dog park first, and then you build the neighborhood.
There's a pro bono opinion.
No, I was just gonna make a point, that's funny, because, we built the dog park there, and we had to get it in before all that development happened, because that's what happens, but they seem to be okay with it. But my point is, and I'm not married to having it in Mining or anywhere else, but as you notice, Bluff was probably the worst place you could put it, because it's it's so wet there, and so all the compaction, and my dog comes home muddy every day, so does yours. And so, having it on a hillside or whatever is not necessarily a bad thing, because you don't get that kind of, so there are some, so when you talk about flat ground, if it's flat, well-drained ground, that may be right, but that's just one of those things that, when you are considering where to put it, you really want to make sure that it's well-drained, because Bluff is just, we have to close the park every year for a portion of time so that we can get the grass reestablished.
All right, Kelly, I'm going to go to you, but Kelly, I'm going to go to you, but I'm looking to start wrapping up on that.
Yeah, so I would talk to your police chief about how to enforce a dog park up there. I did talk to Ernie.
Up where?
Up in Mining.
Yeah.
He had big concerns because they can't pull a patrol car by it. And he said he would prefer a dog park located somewhere that they can easily patrol, so I would definitely talk to him before making that decision.
Well, and I prefer to have a dog park somewhere that is user-friendly, people feel safe and wanna go, right? I don't know if we need to be using our dog parks to enforce safety. We should be putting them in places the community feels safe to go and play and have fun and recreate, so. All right, so that was my little team. I had to do it, Carl.
I just see it coming out.
I had to talk about it. Well, thank you, everybody.
Real
Yeah.
quick, to Kelly's point though, if there were any injuries in access to, so I mean, if somebody's attacked by a dog and we needed an ambulance.
Can't get anything up there.
Yeah, so I think that is a good point. Maybe it's not so much enforcement, but from safety perspective. Now go ahead and end it.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. He was right. What a wonderful community we're all in. We're really engaged here a lot. So, thank you.
And that was free.
That was a